power modes in P6. This is our fifth session of the Modus Toolbox trainings, where we covered an introduction to Modus Toolbox, digital peripherals in Modus Toolbox, captions in Modus Toolbox. We did a session on Wi-Fi in Modus Toolbox as well, and today we are doing low power. Next session will be in analog in Modus Toolbox. Analog in PSOC 6 in MTV. Like always, all sessions are posted in our community and on our GitHub page, and we will send out a recording of the presentation today as well as along with the slides. Today, the training will be conducted by Rakshit, who is an application engineer from the MCU Tech Support team, and he will be ably supported by Dheeraj and Ganesh on the chat. So if you guys have any queries during the course of the session, please feel free to ask queries on the chat. Rakshit, over to you.
Thanks, Jeet. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone attending the session. I would like to provide few instructions that will help you during the course of this session. If you face any technical difficulty during the session, please drop a mail to dheeraj.kamath@infineon.com. You can find the mail ID in the chat section as well. And like Jeet said, if you have any questions during the session, please feel free to use the chat window to submit your questions. I have Dheeraj and Ganesh from my team monitoring the chat section, and they will be able to answer any questions that you might have. Now, before we get started, let's consider a simple scenario where you're given a task to develop an embedded application. It is not a complex embedded application, just a Blinky program. So how do you go about this? So basically you create an empty PSOC 6 application and you use an LED GPIO, initialize that, and in the main loop, toggle the LED and give appropriate delay. Easy, right? Now let's say I want an additional feature. Let's say I want a user button. So whenever I press the user button, the LED should stop. Yeah, the LED should stop blinking, and when I press the button again, the LED blinking should resume. So even this is a straightforward approach. So you use another GPIO pin, initialize that, and you register an interrupt and then enable the event. And in the ISR, you will probably be using a flag variable to get to know when the button is pressed. And if the button is pressed, you'll stop the LED blinking. And if the button is pressed again, you resume the blinking of the LED. So far, so good. But there is one drawback in the application that we just developed. No, the functionality is perfect. It does what it is expected to do. But the drawback is in the current consumption. And if you're using a PSOC 6 device, for a simple blinky LED, you will be consuming about 10 milliamperes current, irrespective of when the current is measured. And this is because when the button is pressed, the PSOC 6 is doing nothing, and it is basically waiting for you to give it some work, and it is just wasting. The resources are being wasted there. So I have developed a similar application, and we'll see how that is different from the application that I stated before. So here is the demo. And to talk about the setup, I have a PSOC 6 Wi-Fi BT Pioneer kit connected to my laptop. And I've also connected my multimeter to the J8 current measurement jumper that is available on the back side of the kit to measure the current consumed by the device. Now, similar to the application that I mentioned before, the LED is blinking. And when I press the button, the LED stops blinking. And when I press the button again, the LED blinking resumes. Now, if I see the current consumed, it is about 10 milliamperes when the LED is blinking. But when the button is pressed, I've used a single HAL API. So when the button is pressed, the LED blinking stops, and I've used a single HAL API to send the PSOC6 into low power mode. And because of this, you see that the current has reduced to about 18 microamperes. And when I press the button again, the LED blinking continues and the current goes back to 10 milliamperes. So when the button is pressed, using the single HAL API, I'm basically telling PSOC6 that you do not have any work at the moment and you can go to sleep. And whenever I have work for you, I'll be waking you up. And that is why the PSOC6 goes into low power mode. And when I press the button again, it wakes up from low power mode. And this drastic reduction in current is very crucial, especially if you're working on a battery powered application. So it is really important to know how to reduce the current consumed by your device. So with this, let's get started with today's session. Let me quickly go back to the presentation. Yeah. So in today's session, I'll first talk about the different low power MCU systems and go on to the low power features in PSOC6. And then I'll talk about the different power modes supported in PSOC6. And we'll look at some of the advanced features in PSOC6 that are transition callbacks. And I have a small demo to exhibit that. And finally, I'll speak about the few power reduction techniques and provide an overview of the backup domain in PSOC6. Now here are few low power devices that I've taken in random. So some of these, most of these devices have a few characteristics that are common. And one of the most visible characteristics is that these devices tend to become more and more smaller. And these devices, we want these devices to be wireless so that we are not stuck to the wired charger. And it also increases the capacity of these devices. We also expect the devices to have a larger feature set. Before, a smartwatch would just track your movement. Now we expect the watch to basically do everything that your smartphone is capable of. So that again, we are not stuck to the charger every time. And we want the devices to be inexpensive so that it is accessible to a wider customer base. Security. We hear about IoT security issues almost daily in our news. So we need to ensure that we develop a secure IoT application. Now let's consider these 2 points for a moment. We expect the devices to have a larger feature set. So as a result, we might have to end up using a high-end, higher performance processor, which most likely has higher clock. And this results in higher battery consumption. And because we want a smaller device, we cannot put a huge battery into these devices. So this results in a reduction in battery life. And this appears to be a trade-off. Here is where PSOC6 comes in. PSOC6 tries to eliminate the trade-offs between power and performance. If you go into PSOC6 product homepage, you'll find these images with the tagline, "Purpose built for the IoT." PSOC6 is designed for low power. It tries to bridge the gap between expensive, power-hungry application processors and low-performance MCUs. It achieves low power with almost no significant sacrifice in performance. It supports 7 power modes with 4 system modes and 3 CPU power modes. PSOC6 is able to achieve an MCU active power of about 22 microamperes per megahertz. And it also has low operational voltage support, where the core voltage can be 1.1 volts or 0.9 volts too. Now moving on to the software side, we have low power assistant, using which you can easily set the initial low power mode of your device just by using the GUI options available. And if you want to transition to different low power modes in your application, then you can use this SysPM PDL HAL driver support that we have to develop your applications faster. Now, I did mention about the system and CPU power modes. First, we'll learn what these are, what is meant by CPU power mode, what is meant by system power mode, and then go into each of these in a little bit detail. Now, first to consider CPU power modes. CPU power modes are standard ARM-defined power modes. The different CPU power modes are CPU active, sleep, and deep sleep. These CPU power modes are specific to the CPU and entered separately independent of the other CPU if you have dual core design. And in these low power modes, the CPU retains the programming state. And these CPU power modes are based on WF5 and WFE instructions, which are the wait for interrupt and wait for event ARM instructions. The implementation, however, is vendor specific. So if we need any specific device specific details like the current consumption, then we'll have to refer to the vendor documentation. Now moving on to system power modes. System power modes are additional low power modes supported by PSOC 6. The different system power modes are system low power, system ultra low power, system deep sleep, and hibernate. These system power modes affect the entire device, and all the CPU power modes that I discussed here are available in both system low power mode and system ultra low power modes. Now we'll have a look at the different CPU modes supported. The default CPU power mode is CPU active, and CPU will be executing code in this mode. And because it is the default mode, all peripherals are available and the memory is powered. And CPU enters active mode on reset or on a wake up event. Now moving on to CPU sleep. Here CPU executes the wait for interrupt and wait for event instruction with deep sleep disabled. And in this mode, CPU halts the code execution. All peripherals are still available, but the CPU core clock is turned off. Any peripheral interrupt marched to the CPU will wake the CPU to active mode. Only the CPU with the interrupt marched to it will be woken up. Now to consider CPU deep sleep. CPU deep sleep is basically the same as CPU sleep, but here the deep sleep bit is enabled, and it sends the hardware request to the device telling that the CPU is ready to enter system deep sleep mode. And all the resources available and the wake up source remains the same. Now moving on to system power modes. Here is an overview of all the system power modes supported in PSOC 6, and I've arranged the different modes based on the current consumed. So the most current will be consumed in CPU active and system low power mode, which is the default mode of the device. And the least current is consumed by the system hibernate mode. And as you can see, all three CPU power modes are supported by system low power mode and system ultra low power mode. Now moving on to each of these in a little bit detail. Like I said, system low power mode is the default operating mode, and so we have maximum system performance and maximum clock frequencies. The core voltage here is set to 1.1 volts, and all resources are available, and any interrupt to CPU will wake the CPU. So here the wake up source is for waking the device from CPU sleep or deep sleep in system low power mode itself to CPU active again in system low power mode. Now there is another power mode where the system performance is restricted to reduce the power consumption, and that is system ultra low power mode. And here the clock frequencies are limited and the core voltage is set to 0.9 volts. The high frequency clocks are restricted to 50 megahertz. Peripheral and slow clocks are restricted to 25 megahertz. Flash write actions are not available in this mode, and all the other resources are available. Again, any interrupt to CPU will wake the CPU from low power mode into system ULP CPU active mode. Now moving on to system deep sleep. It is achievable only when both CM4 and CM0 plus enter CPU deep sleep. Here the LP and ULP regulators are turned off and deep sleep regulators are used. Buck regulator also can be used. We'll speak about regulators in further slides. On wake up, only the woken up CPU enters CPU active mode, and the other CPU will remain in CPU deep sleep, and the system will return to low power or ultra low power based on which mode the device was before transitioning to system deep sleep mode. Here the HF clocks are disabled, and as a result high-speed peripherals are not available. Low-speed clocks and peripherals are still available for use, and externally clocked peripheral like the deep sleep capable SEBs can still be used. SRAM blocks are in retainment mode, and other resources like LPCOM, WDT, MCWDT, RTC, etc. can still be used. The wake-up sources can be interrupts from any of these resources. Now moving on to the final system mode. System hibernate mode is the lowest power mode of the device. Here all the regulators are off. Brownout detection is not available. As a result, the supply should be stable for at least 250 microseconds before entering hibernate mode. And in hibernate mode, the GPIO states are frozen. And when the device wakes up from hibernate mode, it performs a reset, and the reset reason is set to hibernate wake up. And coming to the resources available, all peripherals and clocks are off. The hibernate registers are retained. So if the application requires to store some data, then the hibernate registers can be used. The ILO is still operational, and we can still use LPCOM, WDT, and RTC. The application needs to configure the wake-up source to one of these interrupts. Wake-up pins. So each device will have dedicated wake-up pins, and if you're using LPCOM, keep in mind that internal voltage references are no longer available, and it requires externally generated voltages for wake-up. Yes, I do understand that this is a lot of information in a single slide and hard to grasp everything. The presentation will be shared to you after the session, and you can always come back to this slide or refer device-specific architecture TRM whenever needed. Now that we have an overview of the system power modes that are supported in PSOC 6, let me take a small example to explain how to use these system power modes. Now let's say we are developing a simple movement tracking watch. Now when the user is active, you need to continuously track the user's movement, and so we will need maximum system performance. So we can keep the device in system low power mode with CPU in active mode. Now if we detect that the user is in rest for more than 15 minutes, then we can send the CPU into CPU. We can send the CPU to CPU sleep mode, and we can send the system to system ultra low power mode. And in this case, we can use a WDT interrupt to continuously wake the device to check if the user is in movement or not. Now during night time, or if the user is in rest for more than an hour, then we can send the entire system to system deep sleep to further reduce the current consumption. And in this case, we can use an RTC alarm to continuously wake the device and to check the user's movement. And if the battery is low and it is not enough to sustain the application, then we can send the entire device into system hibernate. And if the application needs, then it can save the tracking data using the hibernate registers, and it can enter system hibernate mode. So this is a simple example using which we can understand how these system modes are used, and we can develop more complex application based on this idea. Now I did speak about low power assistant. So let me switch over to Modus Toolbox to show you what it is. So the low power assistant is available in the quick panel and in the tools section. And once you open a device configurator, you need to click on system tab. You need to click on system tab, and if you click on power section, you'll find the low power assistant here. So basically using low power assistant, you can set the system active power mode, the core regulator that you want to use, the V backup source, and you can set the operating conditions of all the different power rails. You can also configure the hibernate wake up pins, And if you're using an RTOS application, then you can set the RTOS specific details here. And if you want the PDL documentation, the SysPM API reference, you can directly open the reference manual using this link, and it will open the PDL SysPM page. And here you can find all the information regarding the implementation of the driver and how to use these. Yeah, this is the low power assistant of the device configurator of the first demo. And you can see that I have not modified any of the resources. And this is the default state in which you'll find the low power assistant. Now let me quickly switch over to the presentation. Yeah. To enter each of these power modes, we have to follow certain section. We'll see the main steps that we need to follow and to transition between results. It can increase the clock frequencies up to maximum clock frequency to obtain that maximum performance from the processor. And for all this, you can use the HAL APIs, and this API can be used to transition to low power, and to configure the clocks, you can use the CY-HAL clock set frequency. I have used a blue outline to differentiate the step that is required to be taken by the application. Now moving on to system ULP mode. Here first thing is for the application to slow or disable peripherals, decrease clock frequencies below ultra low power limitations. Then we need to set the appropriate wait states for the flash, and finally configure the core regulator to 0.9 volts. Again, to configure clocks, we can use the same API, and to transition to low power, we can use the set system state, and the parameter now would be system_low. Now to transition to CPU sleep mode, first we'll need to clear all pending interrupts and ensure that the sleep deep bit of SCR register is cleared. Next, we need to execute the WFI and WFE instruction to transition the device to low power mode, CPU sleep mode. And for all of this, we can use a ready-made HAL API, and this will take care of transitioning the device into CPU sleep mode. And similar to CPU sleep mode, the steps for system deep sleep mode are almost the same, and I've highlighted the steps that are different using the green border. Here we need to clear the Hibernate bit of the Hibernate register and set the sleep deep bit of SCR register. And like before, all of this is taken care by the Deep Sleep HAL API. And if any CPU gets an interrupt, then the device will not transition to system deep sleep and instead remain in system low power or system ultra low power mode itself. So the application must ensure that both CPUs call the API to enter system deep sleep. Now, if the application is executing a critical code and you do not want the application to the device to enter deep sleep mode, you can use CY-HAL SysPM lock deep sleep API to prevent the device to enter deep sleep mode. And when the code execution is complete, you can use the unlock API to allow the device to transition to deep sleep mode whenever the deep sleep API is called. And now we'll go see the system hibernate mode. Now to transition system hibernate mode, first, if the application desires, it can set the specific data into PWR hibernate data register. And then we need to set the token bits and the unlock bits of the hibernate register. The token bits set the reset reason as hibernate wake up, and the unlock bits are responsible for freezing the IO states. Then the application needs to configure the wake up source, and finally setting the hibernate bit of the hibernate register will transition the device to system hibernate mode. And again, for all of this, we can use the HAL API directly, and application needs to provide the wake up source here. I mentioned about freezing GPIO states. If you have used PDL, then you might remember explicitly calling unfreeze GPIO API to use the GPIO again when the device wakes up from hibernate. But in Modus Toolbox, this is taken care for you and it is called in the BSP init itself. And like deep sleep, if you want to prevent your application from going into hibernate mode, you can set the hibernate disable a bit of the PWR hibernate register, and this will prevent the application from going into hibernate mode. Keep in mind that this bit can only be written once and the device needs to be reset to clear the bit. Now using this flow diagram, we can get the entire picture of how transitions are implemented. Starting from a reset event, the device enters system low power CPU active mode, and from this we can send the device to system ultra low power CPU active mode, or we can send the device into CPU sleep or deep sleep mode. If both the CPUs are in deep sleep mode, then the system automatically transitions to system deep sleep mode. And from active mode, if you want to directly transition to hibernate, you can use the HAL API like I discussed before to send the device directly into system hibernate mode. And all the wake up sources mentioned will wake the device into CPU active. And in this session, I've covered the important steps for transition to each mode. For steps specific to transition between each combination of low power mode, please refer to the device specific architecture TRM. And now that we know how to transition to each power modes and what APIs to use to transition to each power mode, we'll go have a look at how the initial demo was developed in Modus Toolbox. So this is the code for the initial demo. And first are the initialization code to initialize all the GPIOs that I want. And I have an ISR implemented. And here I'm basically using a flag variable to detect when the button is pressed. And when the button is pressed, I'm using a single HAL API to transition the device into deep sleep mode. And you can see that using a single API, I can reduce the to HAL drivers, you'll get a list of all the drivers supported. And if you click on System Power Management, it opens the System Power Management page where you have a general description of how the API is implemented, the different features, and you also have different code snippets that you can use to learn about the HAL API or directly implement the code snippet in your application. And finally, we have all the different data structures, macros, enumerations, and functions that are supported in this HAL driver. And this can be useful to quickly learn about the HAL driver that we need. So now, let me get back to the presentation. Now we'll talk about one of the additional features that is provided in PSOC 6 to ensure that we have control over the transition to low power mode and to ensure that there is smooth transition to different low power modes. When device transitions to low power mode, it first checks if all resources are ready to enter low power mode, performs certain actions before transition, and then some actions after transition. Now callbacks are just regular functions which will be called multiple times in each of these stages, namely check stage, before transition, and after transition. You can use these callbacks to perform certain application specific actions during any of these stages. And in this application, basically the callback configures the speed of the FLL before entering low power mode. And when it wakes up from low power mode, it again configures the high speed FLL and then transitions to active mode. And in the next slide, we'll see how the callback is executed, the sequence of execution of these callbacks when you have multiple callbacks in your application. Generally, each peripheral gets a callback to perform few peripheral specific tasks. And the sequence of execution of these callbacks is basically based on the order of registration. Now, let's say if I have three callbacks, callback 1, 2, and 3, registered in the same order, then the callback execution also follows the same order. That is, callback 1 will be executed first, followed by 2, and then 3. Callbacks that configure global resources, such as clock frequency, should be registered last. They can modify global resources as the final step before entering the low power mode and restore these resources first as the system wakes up. And application should ensure that these callback structures are not modified after registration. And it is also responsible for the scope of the callback. Now I'll go back to the example that I spoke about before. We have three callbacks, and before the device transitions to low power mode, the callbacks are executed in this sequence. And then the device transitions to low power mode. Now when the device wakes up, the execution is in reverse order. This is done because if callback 1 has any dependency on the resource disabled or modified by callback 3, it can enable it first, and when device wakes up to enable it first when the device wakes up to ensure that callback 1 executes successfully. Now, like I said, callbacks are nothing but simple functions, and it has three parameters that we need to know about before using the callbacks. The first is the state. The state indicates the power mode that the device is transitioning to. It can be any of the power modes like system deep sleep, or it can be a combination of different power modes. The next is the mode. It indicates when the callback is called. It is the stage at which the device is during the transition process. The different stages can be check stage, check ready stage, the before transition, or the after transition stage. Finally, we can pass any argument into the callback function. The argument can be anything like the hardware resource object address. If we want to modify the hardware, we can use that. Now moving on to the callback execution flow. Like I said, callback functions will be called multiple times during the transition process. And during each of these stages, the mode will be set to these enumeration values. In the check ready stage, it will be set to CY-HAL SysPM check ready, and then the before transition, and then when the device wakes up, the mode is set to after transition. And we can check for the mode value to figure out which stage the device is in. And again, if you do not want the device to enter low power mode because you are executing something crucial for the application, then you can return false during the check ready stage. And when false is returned in the check ready stage, the mode is set to CY-HAL SysPM check fail, and then all the callbacks are retraced so that any steps performed, like disabling resources, can be rectified to ensure smooth functioning of the device, even though the transition to low power mode failed. Now, one thing to note is that after transition stage is not available in hibernate mode, as device is reset when the device wakes up from hibernate mode. Now, to understand the usage of callbacks, I'll go into Modus Toolbox with another demo in which I've used the callback functions to explain it a little better. In the second, this is the functional flow of the second application. So first we have all the initialization. It is very similar to the blinky LED that I talked about before, but here I've used a timer to basically blink the LED. And the second step is to register the callback. And then in the main loop, it checks if the button is pressed or not. If the button is pressed, then it will transition the device into system ultra low power mode if it is not in ultra low power mode already. and it checks if the button is pressed for the first time or the second time. If it is pressed for the first time, then it will attempt to go into deep sleep mode. And in the callback, I've basically told the device not to enter deep sleep mode by returning false there. And because of this, the device returns to system ULP mode and the loop continues. If the button is pressed for the second time, then the device successfully enters system deep sleep mode and waits for any interrupt that occurs. Now we'll go into Modus Toolbox to see how the code is implemented and how the callbacks are used. Yeah, this is the main.c file of the application. And here we have all the initialization code. And here is where I've registered the callback, initialized the callback structure. The structure basically has 5 parameters: the actual callback function and the power states that it supports. Again, this can be individual power state or a combination of different power state. You can also provide any modes that you want to ignore. Say if you do not have any code for, let's say, before transitioning stage, then you can provide that mode here, and during the execution of callback, it ignores the callback in that stage. So again, mode can be any of these enumeration value that I spoke about before. And the fourth callback is any argument that you want to pass. The fourth parameter is any argument that you want to pass to the callback function. The fifth parameter is used for internal use. Basically, this is used to schedule the different callbacks in the application. And using this API, I'm registering the callback. Now let us go into the actual callback function. Like I said, it has 3 parameters. First is the state, mode, and then the argument if you want to pass any. And in this application, I've not used any argument here. So basically in the callback function, I'm checking for the mode. And when mode is set to CY-HAL SysPM check ready, I'm checking if the button is pressed for the first time or for the second time. If it is for the first time, I'm using a green LED which blinks for about 2 seconds to indicate that the transition to deep sleep failed, and I'm returning false here. And if the button is pressed for the second time, I'm basically stopping the timer, and the callback will be executed again when the mode is set to CY-HAL before transition. And in this stage, I'm disabling any unused RAM and UDBs that I have in the device. I'll get back to these functions in a minute. And I'm basically using the green LED, which turns on for about 100 milliseconds to indicate that the transition to deep sleep is successful. Now let's get back to these functions. So all of the RAM that is available in your device might not be managed by a single RAM controller. So you might have different RAM controllers based on your device. And the RAM controllers manage each SRAM banks. And again, these SRAM banks will be divided into different SRAM pages, generally of about 32 KB memory. Now, if we do not need any of these RAM banks or RAM pages, we can go ahead and disable that to reduce power even more. So to do that, you basically write this particular value into the RAM registers. So the 05FA is the RAM key, and this is implemented so that there is no inaccurate writes into the RAM register. And if your device has multiple SRAM controllers, then you can write the same value in the RAM, the SRAM power control register. And for advanced scenarios, you can use a custom linker script to place all your deep sleep code in a particular section of RAM, and you can disable other parts of the RAM. And to use custom linker script, you basically go into the make file and you find that there is a variable called linker script. And here you can provide the path of your custom linker script. And in this application, I've used a linker script to basically reduce the RAM to about 256 KB. We'll see that in a moment. So here is where I've placed the custom linker script. And here I've restricted the RAM length to about 256 KB. So this is one way you can reduce the current consumption even further. Now, if your device has UDP support, then you can go ahead and disable the UDPs to avoid any leakage current by writing the same value into the register. And when the device wakes up from deep sleep, the mode is now set to CY-HAL SysPM after transition. Here again, I'm toggling the green LED for about 100 milliseconds to indicate that the device woke up from deep sleep. And I'm starting the timer to resume the blinking of the LED. Now we'll see a demo of how this application works. So it is the same PSOC 6 deep sleep application that I've developed, and I'm programming that into the device. And for the setup, it is basically the same setup. I have a multimeter connected to the current measurement jumper of a PSOC 6 Wi-Fi VT Pioneer kit. Now that the device is programmed, we see that the LED is blinking. And when I press the button once, so initially that the current consumption is about 620 microamperes. And in this case, the device is in system low power CPU active mode. And when I press the button once, the green LED blinks for about 2 seconds and the user LED continues toggling. The system is now in system ultra low power mode and the CPU is in active mode. And here you see that the power consumption reduces to about 373 microamperes. Now when I press the button for the second time, the green LED turns on for about 100 milliseconds and here the blinking of the LED, user LED stops. And you can see that the current consumption has reduced drastically to about 8 microamperes. And finally, when I press the button again, the system wakes up from deep sleep, the LED blinking continues, and the system goes back to system ULP mode, and we see that the current consumption is about 372 microamperes, similar to the ULP mode current consumption that we saw before. Now, let me go back to the presentation. So you saw that how we can control the flow of the application, the transition process using transition callbacks. Now, if you have observed, the active current in the first application was about 10 milliamperes, and in the second application, it was about 0.6 milliamperes. And the deep sleep current in the first application was 18 microamperes, and in the second application, it dropped down to 8 microamperes. So in this section, we'll look into few power reduction techniques which I have used to achieve this low power. The main thing is to disable any unnecessary resources that we might not be using in the low power mode. So if you're using any GPIO pins, then it is better to change the GPIO pin state to high impedance state to prevent any leakages through these GPIO pins. And if your design has external components, then it is better to power the external components using PSOC, so that when the PSOC 6 enters low power mode, you can disable the external component using firmware itself. But one thing to keep in mind is that the amount of current that needs to be sourced or synced should not exceed the datasheet values, or else the device will be ruined. Next is to disable any peripherals that you're not using. And if the application is already in production, you might not need the debug mode, and you can go ahead and disable the debug mode in the device configurator to reduce the current consumption even further. Now, like I've spoken before, you can disable any of the unused SRAM pages or banks. And if your device supports UDBs, then you can go ahead and disable that as well. After covering this slide, you might apply the same analogy for clocks as well. So you might think that if I reduce the clocks, then the current consumption also reduces. That is correct, but reducing the clock frequency does not always guarantee lesser current, and it is dependent on the application. To understand this better, let me take an example. Let's say we are using PSOC 6 to basically process data received from the sensor, and the sensor gives out data at every t seconds. So the sensor sampling time would be t seconds. And because of the analogy that I spoke about earlier, let's say we are using lower clock frequencies, and because of this, we are able to process the data that we're getting from the sensor within t1 seconds. So as you can see, t1 is the processing time with lower clock speeds. Now, in this case, the amount of time that the device can be in low power mode is very less. And this actually increases the average current consumption. So instead of this, we can increase the clock frequency, process the sensor data very quickly, and you can use the remaining time to transition the device into low power mode. And using this, we can actually reduce the average current consumption of your application. And something similar to that is to use appropriate clocks for peripherals. And in my application, if you see, I have used a timer with 1 second period. Now for this, if I use a 1 megahertz clock, then it is basically an overkill. So we need to ensure that we set highest clock dividers and clock prescalers that we want in the application. Now let's have a look at other power reduction techniques that we can use. First is to use DMA for data transfer. Here the CPU can perform other tasks or go into low power modes when the DMA is doing the data transfer. Now, next is to avoid blocking functions as much as possible and poll for interrupt based events. The basic idea here is that CPU can go to sleep between these interrupts. Now, if your application is using SCBs or GPIOs, before even starting the application development, it is better to consider SCBs that has deep sleep capability and GPIOs with wake up capability, so that later in the application, planning process, we can decide if we want to use low power modes or not. The final point is to set appropriate regulator and core voltage. PSOC 6 basically has two main regulators, the LDO, which is also called as linear core regulator, and the buck regulator, also called as switching core regulator. The LDO can operate in high and low current modes. The buck regulator provides better power efficiency, but it has less load current capability, and that is something we need to consider. Now, moving on to some of the factors that affect the current measured. One of the most obvious yet most overlooked factor is the multimeter accuracy. We need to ensure that the multimeter is accurate in the range of current that we're measuring. In my case, it is microamperes. So we need to ensure that we are choosing the right multimeter with the right accuracy. Second point is the multimeter shunt resistor, which needs to be as low as possible, ideally within the range of 1 ohms to 10 ohms. If the shunt resistor is too high, then there will be a lot of voltage drop across the multimeter, which might result in the PSOC 6 device resetting. If you're using a PSOC 6 kit, then there will be current measurement guidelines provided in the kit guide. Ensure that your So following all these guidelines to get the accurate current measurements. And if you're comparing these current measurements to the datasheet values, ensure that you're following all the current measurement conditions associated with each of the values in the datasheet. These are just some of the factors that you might want to consider while measuring current consumed by your PSOC 6 device. We also have a simple Excel tool called the PSOC 6 Power Calculator that provides an estimate of the power consumed before the application is developed. And this can be a useful tool during the initial planning stage itself. Now let me go into the tool to show you how it works. So as you can see, there are multiple tabs in the Excel tool. So first tab is the instructions tab. Ensure that you follow all of the instructions mentioned here. The main instruction is to edit data only in the blue cell. All the other cells, the data in all the other cells will be automatically updated for you. The Excel tool supports 5 different configurations that you can use for your application. So basically in the configuration, you set the different settings of your device. You can also rename the configuration. So let's say if I want PLL, I can choose the frequencies and the current that is consumed will be automatically updated. And finally, you will get the total current that is consumed by the configuration. And like that, you can set all the different configurations. And finally, in the summary page, you need to provide the approximate duration in which the device will be in that particular configuration. And based on these values, the Excel tool calculates the average current and the peak current for your application. And you can get an estimate of the current consumed before even actually developing the application. Now, if you're developing a battery powered application, you can provide the battery details here, and the estimate of the battery life of your application will also be provided by the Excel tool. And this can prove to be a very handy tool when you're planning the application itself. These are the different slides that we spoke about just now. Now to move on to the backup domain, we'll try to understand a bit of backup domain. What is it and what is its significance? The backup domain is not a power mode. It is a separate power domain with its own power supply, which can be active during any of the power modes. The backup domain provides an always-on functionality for your PSOC 6 device, and it has the capability of automatically switching between VDDD or VBackup. Whenever VDDD is available, the backup domain is powered through VDDD. The backup domain is reset only when the power is completely removed, that is when VDDD and VBackup is removed, or it is reset through firmware. It has a fully featured RTC with configurable alarm, a 32 kHz WCO which will be sourcing the RTC, a built-in supercapacitor charger that the application can use, and an external PMIC control. The backup system can control an external PMIC that supplies VDDD to your device. PMIC enable is an active high output that is available at a certain pin, PMIC wake up out, and this pin can then be connected to enable input of a PMIC. And finally, the backup domain has 32-byte backup register, and this can be used to store specific device-related information and information like the RTC alarm details. Now with this, we come to the end of today's session, and here are a few reference materials that you can use to learn more about the topics discussed. Hopefully by now, you have an idea about the different low power capabilities of PSOC 6 devices and have motivated you to try out the different low power code examples if you haven't already. If you have any queries regarding any content, then please feel free to create a thread on our community forum, and we'll be glad to help you like always. Thank you all for joining the session, and stay safe. Jeet, over to you.
Thank you everyone for joining the session today. Are there any questions? Okay. Thank you for joining the session. As usual, we'll send out the recording of the video of the presentation and the associated slides. I did see Corey ask for additional set of training on Wi-Fi BT on low power, so we'll try and get that set up as well. And we'll see, and we'll take other inputs for future sessions as well. As usual, please fill out the feedback form, which will be sent out if you have any specific feedback as well. Thank you all.